but behind closed doors, I'm a fool for your love.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is sponsored by Finals Week, giving kids anxiety and giving college kids anxiety ever since the dawn of time. And that is the topic of the video today, and I'm sure you guys know that by the title of the video, but I want to talk about anxiety because this is something that has affected my life ever since I was young. And in general, if I can help one person with this video maybe not feel alone and maybe find a different way to cope with their anxiety, then I have achieved more than I ever could have thought of, because when I was a kid, I would have absolutely done anything to find someone else to talk to about it, or just to find a better way to cope with it, because as a kid, my anxiety literally made my life hell for so many years. So in general, I'm just going to kind of talk about my experiences and what has occurred with my anxiety over these 21 years. And I'm going to try to do it as concise as possible. And I just kind of want to tell my story, hoping that someone may, be on YouTube trying to find a way to better manage their anxiety, or maybe someone just needs to feel like they have someone else that understands where they're coming from. So, without rambling anymore, let's get into the video. I kind of want to start with anxiety can be hereditary. My mother's father, my grandfather on my mother's side, had anxiety. And my father had bad anxiety as well. So I have anxiety on both sides of my family, which essentially just meant that I was definitely going to get it. Now, I do not believe my sister has it, but I was the lucky one who got anxiety. And so for those of you who don't know the exact definition of anxiety, or they don't know the medical definition of anxiety, the psychiatric definition of anxiety is a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive unease and apprehension, typically with a compulsive behavior or panic attack. And the big thing is, and the more important thing is, a compulsive behavior or panic attack that follows it. So, and the weird thing is that this compulsive behavior can take so many different forms. It essentially takes on a form that makes you uneasy. So, for my father, when he was younger, and from the stories he's told me, whenever he was uneasy, or whenever he was in a state of stress or something like that, then he would get a stomachache and he'd feel like he'd have to throw up. So he would get the feeling of being sick, and I mean like actually sick, like he'd have to go to the bathroom and he felt like he was going to throw up. And that was the way the anxiety manifested in him. And I never got to hear how it affected my grandfather. He never really talks about it. But as far as my dad goes, I mean, that's where it went to him. That's what made him nervous. It made him uneasy. And that's kind of this like sick cycle that anxiety takes, is that you start worrying about something, but you don't always know what it is. It's not as easy as like, oh, I have a test tomorrow, I'm going to start worrying about that. It could be something that you don't really understand. It could be something like, oh, I'm worried about turning 10 because, at 10, what happens after 10, like then I'm an adult. And it could be something as easy as just something very low-key that you don't think you're nervous about, but in reality you really can be. And then you start developing these symptoms, whether it's like my father who was feeling sick or something like that, and then you start worrying about that, and then there's that sick cycle of you start worrying about that little symptom that you get, and then you develop anxiety, and then you start thinking about that symptom, and it's just that really sick cycle of it started with one thing and then it just transforms into another. Now, getting to me, originally my first symptom, the way anxiety first manifested itself in me, was that it felt like my throat was closing in. Like I could feel like my tonsils were just going to close in and totally cut off my airway. I wouldn't be able to eat. I wouldn't be able to breathe. You get the point. And it happened a lot when I was a kid. And I mean, I had bad anxiety as a kid. Literally anything. I remember there were times where I got anxious that I'd swallow a piece of pasta weird. And I'd start worrying like, oh my god, is my throat closing in? And then it made it harder for me to eat. Like I literally felt like I couldn't eat. I would start swallowing food and it would start getting like stuck, but it was just my own mind like telling me like, no, you can't eat this, you're gonna choke. And it's like anxiety is very much a superficial, in the mind condition, but it really affects you because your mind can play so many tricks, and your mind is so good at using your own mind against it. And there are several times, I'm going to go through like 2 or 3 stories, but I remember one time that I had an anxiety attack. I don't know what caused it, but my throat started feeling like I was closing in. And I remember just screaming bloody murder. I was running in my old house. This was probably in 1st grade or so. I remember sitting in my parents' room, like, screaming, hysterically crying. Like, you have never heard bloody murder like this. And clearly, like, I'm crying and I'm screaming bloody murder, so clearly my throat's not closing, and clearly I'm getting enough air, but I'm telling my parents, like, call the ambulance, like, call 911, I'm about to die, like, my throat's closing in, I'm not going to be able to breathe, like, call 911, and of course my dad and my mom, knowing I have bad anxiety, they're just telling me, like, it's okay, like, you're not dying, and I'm just screaming at them, like, no, I'm dying. And they're like, "Do you really want me to call 911?" And I was like, "Yes, call." And they never did, clearly. But this feeling of like my throat is gonna close in, I'm gonna die. It terrified me. And whenever it started happening, I would get more terrified that I was eventually gonna wouldn't be able to breathe. And whatever I was originally worried about, I would just kind of forget, and I just started worrying about the symptom that anxiety has manifested in. And that happened several times when I was younger. I didn't really comprehend what was happening, because as a young kid you don't get that your mind is able to play these tricks and is able to manifest itself in real ways. And there were times where I'd go to the doctor and I'd be anxious. I'd be like, "Can you check my tonsils? Like, I feel like they're gonna close in on me." And he'd check me, like, "Yeah, there's nothing there." And it's scary as a kid because you don't really understand it. You don't understand that there's these feelings and that these things are very real, but at the same time, they're all just these manifestations of your worries and of your fears. And then I just remember, like, and for everyone to know before I go into this story, and all my friends probably do know, I'm about as atheist as they come. If you really want to put a technical term on it, I'm more of a skepticist. Or I'm very skeptical, and I'm very much a skepticist, and I'm very much teetering on the fact of, like, you know, if he's real, then, or if there's a God, then, you know, I need proof kind of idea. But I don't want to get into that because I don't want to get too political and things like that, and that's another video for a long time away. But I remember being a young kid and probably in middle school, and I was during one of my anxiety attacks. I remember sitting in my bathroom at like 2 a.m. and I'm just sitting there crying because my throat feels like it's closing in. I have no idea what's going on. I can't sleep. I feel like I'm gonna die. That kind of idea. The whole, you know, typical anxiety attack kind of issue. And I remember just sitting and like just praying, like God, please, like, just take this away. Like, I will do absolutely anything if I can continue my life without dealing with this kind of anxiety. Like, I literally, in several occasions, like, just prayed for it to go away, because it just takes a toll. Like, all these little things, like tests and dating and girlfriends and all things like that, it really, you don't think of it if you don't have anxiety. You're just like, oh, it's just like little butterflies in your stomach, you're fine. But when you have anxiety, it makes it a whole nother devil. Everything that, all these little things that make you uneasy, all these little stressing things in life, they're amplified times 10 because they turn into other things. And eventually, I guess the moral of the story is I've somewhat grown out of my anxiety. I have the symptoms have slowly kind of, I want to say, petered out. I still have anxiety, and I still have, sometimes my symptoms spike, and sometimes I still have these manifestations, but for the majority of the time, I'm able to cope with it to the point where I don't really realize it. But because I learned how to deal with it, and for me, how I dealt with the throat closing was just as simple as me, like, massaging my under my chin with my thumb and just saying, like, there's nothing to be worried about. And for some reason, that's what helped. Again, that's a very mental way to look at it, but that's what helped me. That's what kind of made my throat feel like it was opening up again. And eventually, my mind understood that I knew how to cope with that and I knew how to overcome it. So my mind, being smart, changed it up. And during finals week in college, which is a very stressful time for me. Oh, well, there was actually a time in high school where it switched completely. I before my freshman year of high school, the first day, one day before classes, I had a huge anxiety attack for I have no idea what reason. And it manifested itself in my appendix. And for those of you who have ever had appendicitis, you know that if you move or if you have like little movements, your stomach will just explode in pain. And that's what happened to me, that I was so anxious that I basically had all the symptoms of appendicitis. Like, I literally gave myself the symptoms of appendicitis. And my parents thought I had appendicitis. I couldn't move. Every time I moved, my stomach exploded in pain. There was absolutely nothing I could do. I was crying. My grandmother was there, and she was worried about me. And eventually, I was taken to the hospital. My parents took me to the urgent care because they thought I had appendicitis. It was there all day. I get to the hospital, and everything's gone. Literally everything's gone. All my symptoms, everything that spot came up. I was jumping around. I wasn't having any pain anymore. It was incredible. It was like it was a miracle. Everything was gone, and it just turns out that it was just a very bad anxiety attack. They did an X-ray on my stomach and the whole 9 yards, and I felt terrible because I was like, this was very real to me. Like, the pain was real, but it was all in my mind. Like, literally, my mind played the trick on me, and the pain was so real, though. And then in college, another thing now is the symptoms have kind of morphed again, and they've manifested in another way. And if you guys have ever, I'm gonna guess for guys this is probably more prevalent, but if you've ever taken a number 1, and you feel like you have a little bit left in the tank, and you have that little feeling of like, oh, I just need to like just get one little like drip out kind of idea, that little feeling. Well, that's where it starts manifesting now, because I've learned that that's what prostate cancer, it's a symptom of prostate cancer, and that's something that I'm very terrified of as a guy of getting. And my mind knows this, so it's now turned this symptom, and that's what it manifests into now. Like, and it really has come like only during finals week, but it'll manifest into that where I have this constant feeling of I have just like 1 or 2 drips left, where I just constantly kind of feel like I have to go number 1, that I know I don't, but I feel like I have to go, and it just makes me constantly, every night it's like I go to the bathroom, I get in bed, but I have to like 4 minutes later get up and do it again before I can officially go to bed. And like when I was saying that, like a compulsive behavior, that is that compulsive behavior part of it. Like, literally cannot go to bed without doing this during this finals week, grading, end of the semester period. And it's all because of my brain knows that this is something that worries me, that if they create this symptom and they create this manifestation for me, that I'm going to worry that I have I'm going to have prostate cancer, and then because I'm worrying I have prostate cancer, then I'm going to have anxiety, and it's just, again, the cycle returns. But most of the time I don't. Like, during the day, if I'm going to class, if I'm at the gym, if I'm with friends, or I'm playing Xbox, the symptoms go away. My mind is occupied, and I'm not really thinking of it, so the symptom goes away, and I'm not worried. But as soon as I'm bored, as soon as I'm just laying in bed alone, or as soon as I'm just kind of thinking to myself, or if I'm just not occupied and my brain is not focused on something, the symptoms the manifestations will return, and of course then the cycle is still continuing. And for those of you who just don't understand that, it's just, for those with anxiety, you just know how it feels. And it's just one of these things that it's hard to deal with. It affects more things than most people think of. It affects your relationship. It can affect your school. It can affect just your ability to function in your day-to-day life. I mean, just to give quick examples, in a relationship, my mind works very, I want to say, analytically, in a sense of, especially early in relationships, let's say, and this has happened with Gabe, and actually happened recently, where Gabe's like, okay, I'm going to go do a project with blank, who happens to be a guy in her class. They're good friends, and she's like, I'm going to go get a box at his house so I have something to do with my project. And my mind is very analytical. It's like, okay, she's going to go to Walmart, get a box, go to his house, see if there's any other better options there, and then she's going to come home. That should take 30 minutes to go to Walmart, 30 minutes to get back to his house, about 20 minutes to find a box, and about 20 minutes to get home. So she'll be home in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then my mind sets the timer. And in this situation, it took longer, and it was like 3-4 hours because she just kind of stayed at his house and she was talking. It's a friend of hers, and she, wanted to hang out with him, and that's perfectly fine. But because I have anxiety, my brain works in this analytical and very dumb and annoying way. As soon as that 2-hour mark hit, it switched, and it was like, oh, she's cheating on you. And it's a very immature thought, admittedly. It's something that I don't want to think about, and I trust her 100% completely. But because of my anxiety, it immediately switches into the worst case scenario, and that's what happens in a lot of times with tests and final schedules. It's always a worst case scenario thing. Any kind of medical issue, it's always going to switch right into worst case scenario. As far as like when I was mentioning issues in day-to-day life, these are things as simple as just having a ton of work to do and having a ton on my schedule. That can just overwhelm me very easily because of this anxiety, because of this, that just if I have 5 things I need to do, it's not easy for me to just say, okay, I have to do these 5 things and I have to get it done. It starts stressing me out, and then because of the stress, then it starts building, and again, it's just kind of building on top of one another, and it's becoming just more of an issue. And for those of you who have anxiety, I bet you can relate to this, so I'm going to kind of like cut that where it is. And I just kind of want to talk about 2 or 3 things that have helped me in my life kind of overcome and cope with this. And if you guys want to hear another video about some of my experiences with anxiety and some of the things that have happened with anxiety, I'd be happy to make another one of these, because this is actually kind of therapeutic as it is informational for you guys. But for me, there have been a few things that have really helped me. I've kind of had OCD as well a little bit, where I get really nervous, or I compulsively do some things sometimes, and then they usually fade away. It's like a habit, and then it goes away. There was one point in my childhood where I had to like check all my closets and like all my drawers in my room because I could have sworn someone had planted a bomb in my room, and I did that for like 2 weeks. And then I just stopped and just like overcame it. So as far as coping, when it comes to school, when it comes to work, when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to things like this, I compulsively schedule myself and allot time. So for those of you who don't, or most of you who don't know, I have a list on my phone, on my notes, where I have every homework assignment for the next 2 weeks, every test that's coming up, every quiz, every extra credit assignment, everything that I'm going to have to do, all my videos that I have to put out, don't have to, but I want to put out. I have all the just kind of nitpicky things in my life, errands, and I make this list basically Monday through Sunday, and I have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then weekend. And in that list, I look at my homework assignments, and I look at that week of, okay, I have 4 assignments due this week. I have to get a haircut, I have to go to the grocery store, I have to call my mom, I have to call my grandma, I have to fill out this paper, I have to apply for so many internships, I have to do all this stuff, and I start labeling it through my week on the weekend, and then I know exactly on what days I need to do what assignments, on what days and sometimes I even do it by like time, where I'm like, I'm going to have time in the morning, and the mid-afternoon, and at night, and I'll actually assign a time, like do this at 2, do this one at 4, do this one by 6, and I obsessively, compulsively schedule myself so I know exactly when I'm going to get everything done. And then at the end of the week, I will know I'm going to have all my work done. I don't have to worry about overloading myself. I know exactly when I'm going to get done, and I know exactly when to do it. And not only does that prevent procrastination as a college kid, which is such a big issue for so many people. I've never missed assignments. I never miss class. I'm nearly perfect on attendance in almost all my classes. And it prevents that kind of procrastination, but it really just helps calm my mind. And no matter how much work I have, I'm always scheduled ahead of time. And I always do that every week, making sure I have all my assignments, everything that I could possibly have, that I know, and I'll look at it just over and over again just to know and tell myself that like you got this, like you don't there's nothing that you have missed on this. As far as coping in like a relationship standpoint and kind of like settling my mind about those things, because the anxiety has created a very hard thing. Trust is very hard with anxiety because, again, your mind always goes to worst case scenario and you always think the worst of a situation before it even happens. And, Gabe understands this fully. Sometimes I'll say, like, it's just my anxiety. Like, I just know that my anxiety is going to screw up. So if you could just please help me and just, help me put my mind at ease. And she has, in a lot of cases, helped with that, but it's just, again, that's just time a lot of the times. That over the past 2 years now, she's like, I'm going to go to this guy's house and I'm going to do a project. I'm like, fine, it's okay. 99% of the time, I'm going to be okay with it. It's just, it's taken time, and it's just, over time, I've built this trust, and my mind knows that there's nothing going to happen, so it doesn't give me those attacks like it used to. And then, my final kind of overall coping thing is just, you just got to talk about it. And I have Gabe for this. And, when I was younger, I had my dad, and I have friends that I know I could talk about it. But it's just one of those things that it just helps to kind of know you're not alone, that someone else understands, and that you're just talking to someone else helps. In my case, that when I talk to Gabe about it, or when I tell her, I'm just having very bad anxiety, she'll say, just come here and just cuddle and just take your mind off of it, or just try to get your mind off of it. And I'm going to accompany that talking with just taking your mind off things. So if you're feeling super stressed, or you're having anxiety, and you're developing those manifestations, try and take your mind off something. For me, playing Overwatch or playing Xbox or doing something like that is perfect. Yesterday, I tried to record it for the channel, but I forgot the camera. We went to get some super cool milkshakes. Check my Instagram for that. We went mini golfing, and then we came back and we went bowling, and we did all these things. And the entire time, I'm not thinking about, and then we came back and we played Mario Kart for like 3 hours. I'm just not thinking about my anxiety. I'm thinking just about what's going on. And of course, those manifestations can't come up if I'm not thinking actively about them. And that was something that's helped me a ton, that if I can stay busy during these times, that it just helps so much. We're going on like 20 minutes now on this video, which is a lot longer than I wanted to talk about this, but this is something that I feel like it'd be hard to talk about in 10 minutes. So I think I'm going to end the video here. I hope some of you guys find some help in this and find some comfort in this video, knowing that you're not alone. This does happen to a lot of people, and especially it's happened to me in my life a lot. And I hope one of the 2 or 3 coping ways that I've kind of figured out help one of you guys. So if you want to see another one of these videos and want to hear me talk about this more, or if you just want to have a conversation in the comments section, please just comment down below or just let me know. If anything, please just like and subscribe. It helps me know that I'm putting out worthwhile content and that you guys are actually enjoying it. But as always, stay achieving, guys, and we'll see you at the next video.